Excellent. And I will now share the screen I need to share. There we go. Yes, share. There we go. So hopefully now you can all see my screen. Uh, that's quite confusing. But anyway, hello everybody, and welcome to sort of disability equality, the social model, and a lot more. Today for Open House. This training is specifically for people who volunteer to meet the public. Let me just say yes to the OK you can record. And if you're not here live and you're watching it on recording, hello. Basically, it's just a quick scoot through some training and some understanding of how to make sure that disabled visitors or older visitors or just anyone that needs a bit of extra help enjoy their time visiting whatever location you are being volunteers for. So let's get on with the show. He says, trying to get this. There we go. Well, this is me. Oh, blimey. Now I'm looking at it, I feel really old because, God, I was young and lovely. Basically, I am Mick Scarlett. I currently am the CEO of a charity called FAB. And we, as part of what we do, deliver training like this to good people like yourself, where you kind of learn how to make sure that people are included in as many ways as possible. What we do is we run clubs and things called adventures, which are kind of like residential holidays, but with loads of activities where people are kind of pushed to find out about themselves and find out what they can do. I went to one when I was about 15. I've always been disabled. I was born with cancer. And that is me, that is a black and white picture down there, is me as a baby when I was being given chemotherapy, and my chemotherapy made my hair go spiky. So I have the claim to being the first punk, because that's me in 1965. Yeah, get over, yeah. And that's why my hair is still spiky, because it made my root follicles grow deformed, so my hair won't lay down. So I had to wait until 1976 to have cool hair. But anyway, I've been a musician, TV presenter, a journalist. I've done a lot of campaigning, but it's really nice now to work trying to leave a legacy for better for younger disabled people. And that's me. I'm also a consultant. I advise buildings on how to become more accessible. And that's while I'm here too, because I train people on how to give good service. Enough about me. What we're going to cover today is, what does disability mean? What's the word about? We're going to talk about some facts and figures and how many people actually out there are disabled. Models of disability quickly. Talk a bit about barriers, and they're the things that you help to break down when you're volunteering. Quick whiz through some language, and I will send Simon a sheet of advisable language to use, so you've got that if you need it later on. And inclusive support, so that you know how to help anyone if they need some assistance. And then we'll have questions if you save them for the end, or that'll be great. If you're watching this on catch up, then you can send them to Simon and he'll send them to me and I'll answer them. So it's a safe space. I am unoffendable. So when you've got your questions, you can send them. Don't be embarrassed about a question. I'd much rather have someone ask a question that was badly worded or was something that you kind of thought, well, he's not going to be happy if I ask him this, because it's better to ask than to go away and go, I don't know what, I really wanted to know that, but I daren't. You can put your hand up or there will be a question section at the end. And like I said, if you're watching or the video, then just contact Simon and he'll contact me. And it will be fun. I am going to do this really quickly. I'm not going to be quite so interactive as I usually am, because we've got an hour to do a lot. So eyes down for a full house. What does the word disabled mean to you? Just think about it. If I say disabled, what's the first thing that comes into your head? What's the first picture or phrase or whatever that comes into your head? Just think about it. Most people will talk about what a person cannot do. So I have issues with walking, as I am paralyzed. So I cannot walk. I also have issues with reading. I have a thing called Erland syndrome. So words move on the page for me. And it's why all of my slides have got quite big lettering on them, because if they get any smaller than that, I can't read it. um, and I also have just been diagnosed with ADHD. And what's weird is I didn't really know, I didn't think I had any signs of it, but everyone since being diagnosed has said, yes, you are. So that's what I can't do. But people also say, oh, wheelchair, guide dog, things like that, hearing aid. They talk about aid. So it's either what the person can't do or something they might use because of something they can't do. But the thing is, that's disability is about a lot more than that. Because if you think about it, and this is something that really it's funny, I do a lot of stuff where I'm talking to kids about this, and they all love this bit because I say, have you ever felt left out? Have you ever been not able to join in with friends? Have you ever not been able to follow or understand a conversation? Have you been judged unfairly? Have you ever had what you're saying just ignored and been talked about or even over, which is something if you're in a wheelchair, you get quite a lot, or refused entry to a building? Now, the reason why the kids love it is because they all go, yeah, yeah. And most adults will have had most of these, but when they were younger, when you're a child, you do get talked about. You do get left out by your friends. Sometimes your friends will do something and not invite you. Well, all of those are really common experiences if you're disabled. And I was talking to Simon about the Open House Festival. I've heard about it for years. I've always fancied going. But being a wheelchair user, I know that many of the locations won't be wheelchair accessible because they aren't open to the public normally. So again, I'm not able to join in. And it happens a lot. And it's happened all through my life. So that is also something about what disability means. And we'll be exploring that in a bit. But another thing that people kind of think about is that there's not that many of us about. And that's not actually true. So these are government figures. There are 67 million people in the UK and 24% of the population are disabled. So 16 million people. And that, as you will see, includes people of all ages. So you've got children, 11% of children are disabled under the law, 23% of working age people. And then once you get to state pension age, it rockets. So it goes 45% as you reach state pension age. And by the time people reach the age of 80 and above, it's 58%. 7% use a wheelchair. And out of that 7%, most people that use a wheelchair can actually walk a bit, somewhat. And so it's actually a tool to allow them to go further and have access to the outside world. 9% have a hearing or a visual impairment, and 13% have a learning disability. And all of those people have friends and family and people they go around with. And when you combine all those people, they have an average spending power annually of 274 billion. And I think, if I remember rightly, the combined spending power of disabled people alone is about 87 billion. So we tend to be portrayed as being a drain, but actually we are an economic force. And, a lot of people will go places and they won't go if they know they can't take their friend, their family member. So it's really important to try and do as much as possible. Mobility is the most frequently reported impairment type. So most people have issues with getting around, with their physical ability to get around. But also, people have problems with stamina, breathing and fatigue, and that's at 35%. And then mental health is at 32%. Now, if you add all those together, hang on a minute, we haven't even talked about loads of the other impairment types, and yet we're over 100% there, Mick. And that's because we have more than one condition. We live with more than one condition. Like I said, live with paralysis, chronic pain, ADHD, and Erland syndrome, a kind of dyslexia. So I'm neurodivergent, I live with chronic pain, and I have a physical impairment. And a lot of people live with impairments you cannot see. So you can see I can't walk, but you can't see I'm in pain, and you can't see my issues with reading or my ADHD. So it's sort of really important to understand that a lot of people that are disabled aren't instantly recognizably so. The Equality Act, so we know the numbers, but what does it mean? Well, the Equality Act basically says this: you are disabled if you have a physical or mental impairment that has a substantial and long-term negative effect on your ability to do normal daily activities. Now, you think I know that off by heart, but I don't. What's weird is substantial, and this is actually what the law says. This is taken from the law. Substantial is more than minor or trivial. so, so one thing is the opposite of another thing. But anyway, the way it's described in the law is it would take someone much longer to do a normal daily task like getting dressed. And it's funny, I never considered myself disabled because of that. But yet, if I think about it, obviously with paralyzed legs, getting dressed is harder for me than it would be if I could just step into my shoes or just stand up and pull up my pants, for example. So there is a lot of flailing about. I've always said to my wife, it looks a little bit like Kermit trying to get dressed when I dress. But that would have made me disabled, not just not being able to walk, just that. And this is why a lot more people are realizing that they are disabled because they look at the law and go, oh, actually, that is me. And long term means more than 12 months. So basically, sometimes it can be from diagnosis, but for other people, it can be from like you can go, right, I'm diagnosed, so I know that I've been disabled before because it's a long term condition. And you also can have a situation where you aren't necessarily diagnosed, but you know that there's something up. And while you're in the process of being diagnosed, then you are still disabled under the law, which means you're protected. And the protection is reasonable adjustments. And that's really what you'll be doing, is you'll be helping people get as much out of their experience as possible. Because the Equality Act basically says that when you're working with the public, that things should be done to make it easier for a disabled person to do the things they want to do. And reasonable under the law isn't really about money or anything like that. It's about what would the average person in the street want and expect. It's often misunderstood as meaning how much does it cost and things like that. It doesn't. It basically means if someone who wasn't disabled went somewhere and had an experience, then that's what you're aiming for with your reasonable adjustments. So you should really try to allow the disabled person to do as many things as possible without too much help. You should be able to make them feel proud of themselves when they need help so that they don't feel embarrassed. There should be no cost to the disabled person, and it should be in place before they are needed. And that's, again, why you're getting this training, so that when you're there, you have a bit of knowledge to fall back on to say, how can I help? And there we go. That's that bit. Now the next bit, models of disability. Now I have had people point out that I'm using models like pictures of models, but that's because it's not that kind of model. Also because this is a picture of a group of disabled women who were part of a TV show way back in the 2010s called Britain's Next Top Model with a Difference. And this was a TV show. There was a show called Britain's Next Top Model. And rather than include disabled models within it, what they did was they had a special show where only disabled people joined, and they were all competing against themselves to be this next top model with a difference. And I think it really demonstrates the way that sometimes you can be othered. All of these women are beautiful. They could have all been models. At least two of them became models and were models when they entered. And it's very much how we are treated, that we are other. And that's why we need to think about models of disability. What are really models? Well, they are what academics use. So they are used for sociology and psychology and other ologies. And they're used in architecture to help you understand spaces and how they work. And what these models are, like models of aging and wealth and poverty, models of disability examine how people think about that group. And so the first model, the one that most people think about, is called the medical model. Basically, the way the medical profession thinks about being disabled. It's what's wrong with you, what's not like the norm, what's broken in your body that we need to fix, that we need to cure. And if you can't be cured, this is a bad thing. That being disabled is a bad thing, a sad thing. And really, you are in a position where, because you are disabled, you aren't really going to be able to fit in with society like you could do if you weren't. And so it does make you feel inferior. But it also says that if you can't be cured, you need to be looked after. So it's very much a kind of doctor nurse way of thinking. And it means that people tend to do things for you, and that can get in the way of you being able to do the things you want to do. It also kind of says that you are going to be left out in some situations. It's one of those sort of ways of thinking that says, well, what do you expect? You know, I cannot walk. So there are going to be places I cannot get into. And that's just the way it goes. One of the things about this model is it sort of says society is fine, and we, the disabled person, disabled people, are the ones that need to be changed to fit society. So we are waiting for the cure of spinal cord injury. We're waiting to have, you know, my inability to read properly fixed, or we're waiting for neurodiversity to be cured. And that isn't necessarily great as far as disabled people go. There's another one called the individual or individualistic model, and this has really taken off since the 2012 Paralympics, in that it says, like the medical model, yes, you are broken, you have things wrong with you. But while it's terrible and sad that you're disabled, you can overcome it. If you try hard enough, you can be you need to try to enter into society, push yourself. So again, it's not saying we'll change stuff, but if you try harder, you can fit with us. And you know, anyone that knows anything about neurodiversity understands the term masking, where someone tries not to appear to be neurodivergent so that people think they're normal. And that's a great example of it. I was raised with this kind of understanding that it's terribly sad that I'm disabled, but you know, I'm not like other disabled people. So I try so hard and do so many things that people think you wouldn't be able to do. It pushes a load of pressure on the disabled person to try. And it means that we are liable to hurt ourselves, to injure ourselves, or to feel a failure if we can't do the thing that we want to do. But it still doesn't say, can we make things better? Can all of us make things better for all people in society? And it kind of creates a two-tier system. So you've got some people that are really good, you know, that have tried to do something. I'm amazing. Look what I can do. And then there are people that tried and failed, or the people that didn't try because they knew they were going to fail, or that it would hurt them. So, as you can tell, both of these models we don't really like. So, what they don't necessarily mean that anything's going to change. They place a lot of responsibility on the disabled person themselves for being disabled. And it affects your mental health, it affects how you feel, it affects your job opportunities, but it also affects how other people think of you. You know, I now am a CEO of a major charity. Now, I know, and recently I earned a doctorate, and I know when I was at school that no one ever expected me to succeed like that at all. You know, let alone be a TV presenter and a musician and all the other things I've done. So those models say, you know, you're disabled, so you aren't going to amount to much, and we do see a lot of it at the moment in sort of rhetoric around disability. But back when, you know, this is in the sort of late 70s, early 80s, there was a new way of thinking that was needed, because disabled people were saying, this doesn't represent my life. It's not all about me being fixed or me trying to be better. There's more to it than that. And that's where the social model of disability came about. And that says, yes, we all have stuff about us that makes us different. Like I said, I didn't know I had this Erland syndrome reading issue. I just couldn't read until I was about 9. And then suddenly I could. And because I'd spent ages trying to read, and I did. My brother, who's profoundly dyslexic, really didn't learn to read until he was in his 30s. But he, again, tried and tried and tried. Now, the social model said, that's great, but isn't there anything we can do? Isn't there something that society could have done to make life easier for people when they find reading or walking or hearing or seeing or understanding hard. And so it just sort of says, there's nothing wrong with being disabled. That's just part of who we are, part of human nature, part of biology is that some of us will be disabled. So what can we do to make it fairer and better? So you don't have to think of it like using a sat nav. You could go the quick journey, or you could go the economical journey, or you could go the most direct route. There's 3 different ways of getting somewhere. That's what the social model says. It doesn't have to be done one way. It can be done more than one way. So you will notice I'm reading a lot of the slides, and that's because I've worked before with people who were visually impaired, who when I'd finished my training had said, thank you so much for reading the slides, because I feel like I've actually got the training that everyone else got. Even though as trainers, you're taught not to do that. And it basically, what the social model says is, let's make it fairer. Let's say that everyone can join in, but they might join in differently. And so the key of it is it values disabled people. It says that they have a right to enjoy life, to fulfill their potential. And we, as society, can do more. And that's the key. It says, these barriers that make us disabled can be removed. They can be lessened or removed. And like I said, that's what volunteers for this event are doing. They're saying someone might need some help. It might be that as they're going around and you're explaining something, someone might say, well, actually, I'm having a bit of trouble seeing that. Could you describe it to me? And then you just describe a painting, the wallpaper, something like that. And it might be, oh, thank you so much. It's allowing someone, it breaks that barrier down. And you're there to say, if you need me to describe it, I will. That's what the social model says. It's just a little bit of effort from everybody, not the individualistic model where it's all on us, it's on everyone. And then we can build a better, fairer future. The way to understand it, if all that became like, what? Is I'm wheeling along. I'm with my wife who can walk. We come up to a flight of stairs. Is it my fault that I can't walk up them? Or is it society's fault for only building a flight of stairs and not an alternative solution? Now, many of the buildings you'll be volunteering in will probably be built at a time when stairs were obviously the answer. They're always the answer. Boo. But we now live in a society where we know there are other solutions. There are ramps, there are lifts. Do buildings need steps to get into them? Or could you just build a ramp so that they are accessible even on the ground floor? Because what's weird is not only are many places not accessible to me to live or to work in, but loads of my friends live in places I can't visit them in. So they tend to come here because it's accessible. But that's because we still build places that aren't accessible. Is it my fault that I can't get in them? Or is it society's fault for not moving on and changing the way we build? So there you go. Now I'm going to quickly whiz through barriers. He says, making sure he's not overrunning. No, I'm doing quite well. Anyway, so the social model says that disability comes from the barriers that we face. That's what disables us, not my inability to walk, but the fact I live in a society that says things should be done one way, a normal way, and they throw up barriers. So the first one is, normally this is done the other way around, but I always think it's really important to understand that attitudes and assumptions are the biggest problem. Part of the reason why I talked about numbers at the start is because one of the assumptions is there's not that many of them about. Going, well, what do we need to? I don't get disabled people come here. Well, no, of course you don't. If we can't get in, we don't come. If we don't feel included, we won't include ourselves. But, that lots of people think that we aren't able to choose what to do, that people will do it for us. They help us, that we, I still get people talk to my wife about me. Does he want something? Are you, is he okay? And we still, although we use less cash now, but when we were first together for many years, I would pay for something and then she'd be given the change. And this happened so much that we decided to get a little money pot, a little piggy bank. And every time this happened, we come home and put that change in the piggy bank. And that used to pay for our holidays. That's how much it used to happen. And yes, it was on what I call similar to this, where someone said, but Mick, that means you've paid for all the holidays. And I was like, didn't think of that. But there we go. So another one that happens is that we might be emotional. And lots of people say, I've had it loads of times where people go, oh, there's always one mate if I'm upset or I'm shouty or I'm sad or, and what tends to happen is it's one of those things where, and I do a lot of this with customer facing staff, you may find that someone gets grumpy because not with you, but just with the situation. And then that's where you, being a really nice person, comes in and just goes, oh, well, I'm really sorry, la, 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 la. And you diffuse the situation. But we aren't all sad or grumpy or shouty. We're not all crying and stamping most of the time, although my wife would probably challenge that, as I do shout quite a lot, but mainly because I see the world not being made more accessible, even though I know it should be. Another one is that we need to be pitied or looked after. People tend to say, is this your carer, to my wife? And I go, no, and she's my wife, poor thing. But we can't work. People are still amazed that I have had a job for most of my adult life. And that making any change is just too difficult or it costs too much. Because we're still thought of as other. An accessible, inclusive world works for everybody. A world that's designed for, say, me as a wheelchair user works really well for kids. It works really well for older people. It works fantastic for parents. And so it's not about, oh, it's wheelchair accessible. It's just inclusive. It's better for everybody. So it's not about extra costs for us. It's extra costs to make a better tomorrow. Like we said, I must be unhappy and we must wish we weren't disabled. This is not true. Many of us are happy with who we are and what we are. We just want things to work better. Of course, there will be people that wish they weren't, especially, and it's normally something that happens quite a lot when you're new to it, because many disabled people become disabled later in life. As we saw, only 11% are children. So all the rest of that population come from acquiring an impairment later. But the big one is you don't look disabled. So people don't believe that you need help, that they don't need to offer assistance, or that you're, faking it, which is a big problem at the moment. If I could walk, I would still have ADHD and Erland syndrome. And what's funny is my brother has also got ADHD and he's got dyslexia, and my father obviously had ADHD and dyslexia. And it's funny that they exist in a world where no one knows they are disabled, but purely because I am a wheelchair user, I'm instantly recognizable. And so that's one of the big assumptions. Communication is another big issue, how you get information out. So if we only talk, if we only give it verbally, that's really difficult for some to understand, especially if you're deaf. And the same goes if you only do it in written form. So you might find that you need for some people to explain in verbal ways, something that's printed, something that's written down. And the same goes for giving people time. My brother, being profoundly dyslexic, when he reads something, it takes him time. So it's understanding that. Making sure that things, if you're doing any publicity, try to do it in plain English. There is a thing called Easy Read. Now you'll notice I've been using smiley faces and silly pictures. That's because Easy Read uses sort of images and graphics to illustrate something. So as you noticed, the social model had lots of smileys, the medical model had a nurse smiley, the individualistic model had a Superman smiley. That's because you're trying to use images to illustrate what you're saying in words. And the words should be written for someone with a reading age of 8 and under. And then, of course, you have large font and braille. You need hearing loops. If we have more of them, that'd be great. Closed captions, British Sign Language. Say someone comes and visits and is hearing impaired. Remember, you've got your mobile phone. Mobile phones now can convert what's being said into closed captions. So you can actually work with someone and support them in a really simple way. Obviously, websites need to be made accessible, and audio description. It says on videos, but you might be needed to do that. And it really is like this. Mick, a blonde white man with a blue top on, sits in front of a bank of musical instruments, keyboards, while delivering a training session with a microphone in front of him. And that would be an audio description, which would be enough to be able to make someone understand. And lots of people will describe themselves. So they'll go up and say, hello, I'm Mick. I'm a blonde elderly, aging person, a punk rocker with spiky hair, wearing a blue shirt. And that way people can have a picture of who you are. And then you've got just design, the big one, the one that most people think about, like steps and large gaps and curbs. And I say broken lifts because lots of people put lifts in and then don't keep them repaired. He says in a block of flats with 2 lifts, that's why we moved here. And one of them's been broken for over a month now, and we're not happy. But also lifts that you can't use on your own. There's something really weird about always needing to ask for help. This happens a lot in museums where you go up and say, "Oh, I need to go up to the next floor," and they'll go, "Okay, well, hang on, I'll just put the key in the lift, and then I'll come with you." And you're like, "No, I'm all right. I can handle it." But you're being treated like you can't. Places to sit, really important, especially in a building that isn't, say, fully accessible. But you might get people that are able to walk up and down the stairs and look at all the wonderful building, but that might tire them out. So actually say, right, we're going to put some seats out to make sure if someone needs to sit down, they can. I don't think many of the places you'll be going to and showing will have accessible toilets or changing places toilets, but it'd be nice to know where the nearest one was. If that information can be found out, that's really handy, because then someone could look around and go, "Oh, it's fantastic. I've had a great day. Now, where's the loo?" And you can go, "Oh, it's just down there in the Costa, or just around the corner in somewhere else." That's great. And also knowing where the local blue badge parking is really handy. There are so many of these that I could be here all day, but I won't be. So I'll move on. What's really important to understand is the social model does not say that disabled people can't be sick or need caring for or need medicine. It's a big problem that happened when it first started being championed, was that people started to think that we didn't want to focus on the fact that there are conditions that need medical treatment. I need pain medication. I need a wheelchair. That's medical intervention. And that I have days where I'm healthier and better, or more sickly. I'm, as you can tell from my voice, currently getting over a bad flu. And for me, flu has other implications to my health because it causes swelling, and because my nerves are trapped in scar tissue, that can make my pain worse. So, of course, I might be iller than someone else. So that's really important. But that's fine. That's part of life. What the social model says is that we all deserve the chance to join in, and that together we can improve things. And I think it's really important to remember that that is what you will be doing. You are the embodiment of the social model, because as a volunteer, you're supporting people to come in. And what's really funny is it's not just about disabled people. Giving the best sort of support to everybody means that you will be also helping people. But as I said, you won't know they're disabled. They won't come in and kind of go, da-da. So that's really important. Now, words panic people quite a lot. So don't worry, I'll scoot through. And like I said, I'll send out a little form with a list of do's and don'ts. But basically, words matter. They are words that can really hurt. They can make you feel small. They can remind people of what they can and can't do. It's quite important to think that I'm a very confident disabled person, but I've always been disabled. If I woke up like a week ago and found that I could no longer walk, how would I feel about life? Words would be a lot more important to me then, because they would remind me. So it's really good to understand that words have power. So let's find out how we can make sure that we don't offend anyone. Now, I tend to use the word impairment rather than disability when I talk about the things that are different about me. That's obviously what I do because I'm training. Most people don't. But I always say that it's quite a good one to remember that some disabled people are a little bit funny about this one. And I know I'm one of them. Poor BBC. I'm always putting them up on this. But so disability isn't really about what makes me different. It's about what I can't do because I'm different. The impairment describes my medical condition, as we saw in the law, has a long-term impairment, a mental or physical impairment. So that describes my difference. And then disability describes what happens to me because society isn't set up for me in that way. And it's probably too much information, and you don't need to worry about it too much because most of the public won't care. but it's just a really handy way of being able to differentiate so that I can lessen my disability while admitting my impairment. So that's it. Don't worry, that's probably the last thing you need to kind of hear and then not worry about too much. Uh, Now, I'm going to do a quiz, but don't worry, you don't have to join in. So I'm just going to go through and I'll say, think of the answer, and then I'll tell you whether you're wrong or right, and then you know, but I won't. So here we go. So you might score 100%. Here we go. Right. Now, a big one is, should you say disabled people or people with disabilities? What do you think? Disabled people? People with disabilities? Well, it should be disabled people. Loads of people go, oh no, it's people with disabilities. But actually, the reason why it isn't is because if we apply the social model, what we're saying is that we are disabled as an action on us, which then means like a blue sky, like a grey day, like a stormy sea. The disabled bit isn't about us, it's about what happens to us. It's a descriptive, it's an adjective. So it should go before. If it's people with, it becomes again ours. And it becomes about what we cannot do, not what we are not allowed to do. And it's why lots of people say, well, if you put people first, it's all about the people, but it isn't. That's just a descriptor. So that's how we prefer disabled people. Most disabled people do. But I'll talk about something in a little bit to get you nice and happy about that. Am I suffering from my impairments or am I living with? What do you reckon? Well, yes, it's living with. Just purely because suffering from is a kind of it, I live with chronic pain, right? And it is quite bad. But I always say I live with and I live well with because I have a fantastic life despite it. It can get me down, it can stop me doing things. But suffering from makes it sound like it rules me, whereas I try to rule it. But some people will say suffering from, and it tends to be, I've always found, a terminology that's used when people are new to something. So older people or people that just become disabled or just started to deal with their impairment or illness. But it's best if you say living with. Am I wheelchair bound or am I a wheelchair user? Well, I'm a wheelchair user. Um, Wheelchair bound is quite out of date now. And it kind of makes it feel like if you say someone's wheelchair bound, it says they said all the time in the medical profession. I still don't know why. To be able to train the NHS, but it makes it sound like it's something sad. It's something you cannot escape. I do get out of my chair a lot. Some people find it harder. Some people find it easier. Like I said, some people can actually walk. So it's not a sad thing. It's not a taking away power. Actually, a wheelchair is a tool of freedom. It means I can get around, and I have had a fantastic life on wheels. I was 15 when I lost the ability to walk entirely, and so everything I've done as an adult, I've done on wheels, and so for me, it was a tool of liberation. It was fantastic. So I'm a user. It's a tool, and that's really important. Okay, this is always a good one. Able-bodied or non-disabled? What are the people who aren't disabled called? Well, most people would think one, but actually it's non-disabled. Purely because lots of people who are disabled have bodies that are able. So, it's not all about physicality. It can be about a lot of other things. But also it goes back to being disabled is about what you can't do with your body. So if you aren't disabled, you're able-bodied. Whereas it might sound clunky, but non-disabled just says, I'm disabled by society, but if you don't have any impairments, you aren't. So you're not disabled, non-disabled. And then this one is kind of important for what you're going to be doing. Do you call someone a PA or a support worker or a companion or a carer? And it is really tricky. But my advice is always call someone a companion or a PA or a support worker. Carer is great, but it's much more about being looked after. And lots of people are very proud of being carers, and lots of people use it to describe the person they're with all the time. But again, as a volunteer, what you're doing is you're trying to represent open house in the best possible light. So I would use companion. Um, the other thing, of course, and we'll talk about this in a bit, is ask people their names, and then you don't need to worry. So it's really important, but it rebalances the power. When I'm out with my wife, is also my PA for when I'm doing work outside the house. And so when she comes to that, she is there to assist me. She's my personal assistant. She carries out the things I can't do, carry things or stuff like that. So she does stuff for me that I would do for myself if I wasn't disabled. And that, again, is that reasonable adjustment. She's there leveling the playing field for me. And I do access audits. And there's been a couple of times where I've not been able to get in the building at all. So she's gone in and been my eyes and ears and measured everything. And we've done it over WhatsApp by video. So I'm instructing her and she does it. And so that's why it's important, because you could say, oh, my wife's there being my carer, but she's not. She's not caring for me. She's supporting me to live independently. There are words you obviously won't use. Obviously, cripple and retarded just is one that's being used a lot of the minute. Please don't. Invalid and handicapped have not been used for many years. Same goes with spastic. It is cerebral palsy. Then there are ones like mental and mad and stupid. And it's funny when I tend to explain to people that these are ones that kind of you might use, say, to describe a night out. Oh, we had a mental last night. We went mad. Oh, we drunk ourselves stupid. But also they are actually medical terms that come from measuring levels of intelligence that can be really sad and really hurtful, especially to those people with mental health issues. So it's worthwhile. I have to spend time trying to think of other ways of using, describing that. And silly is a good one, I think. Um, Also tragic. It's not tragic. However much you might meet someone and think, oh, poor thing, don't say it, please. Special. Special needs is something that gets used a lot. We just have alternative or different needs. Suffering, we've already said that's a bad word. Brave. I used to always be told how amazing I was and how brave I was to overcome, and overcoming's another one. But try to avoid it. Battling. Vulnerable is used a lot now, isn't it? It became quite common after COVID. Again, am I intrinsically vulnerable or am I made to be vulnerable? Did COVID make me vulnerable? Like, was I already vulnerable before COVID? Or when COVID came out, was I vulnerable to catching COVID? So it's actually interesting that we've started to replace the word disabled with the word vulnerable, but they both have the same meaning, which is in a specific situation, someone is made something by an external force. And I know it's used a lot in security sort of situations. And I do a lot of work with rail staff. And someone from the security team was saying, well, what about a woman late at night on a platform? And I always say, but she's not intrinsically vulnerable. She's made vulnerable by the fact that there are predatory men out there. So actually, she's not intrinsically vulnerable. She's made vulnerable by society. And so we can do something to change that. And inspirational, something used so often. But I always say, what have I done to inspire you? If this training inspires you to be better and more inclusive, fantastic. But if you go away and go, well, wasn't it inspirational to see that Mick talking and doing things? That's not inspirational. That would be offensive. So don't say what happened to you or why you like that. Again, like I said, don't say you're so brave or don't say you're inspirational. I don't think if I was like you, I couldn't cope. It's something we get a lot. Um, I've even had people saying if I was like you, I'd kill myself, which is not, definitely don't say that. I'll pray you'll be cured. And you might feel it, you might have a very deep feeling, faith, but don't say it to other people. You can even pray for us in private, but please keep it to yourself. And you don't look disabled. Believe it or not, as a wheelchair user, I used to get this quite a lot when I was young. People would come up to me and go, are you really in that? Or you're just doing it because it's cool? But people say it a lot to people with invisible impairments. So after all that, remember that people are people. So people will use different words. How they describe themselves is fine. You're doing it to be representative of open house. So it's really important to try and make sure that you get it right. But really importantly, if you're talking to anyone else, you don't ask them anything. You don't refer to them differently because they're a different ethnicity or a different gender or a different sexuality. So in the same way, if you're assisting someone that's disabled, you don't need to be talking about being disabled. You just need to know what it is that they need assistance with. Which brings me on to the final section, he says, thinking I've got 9 minutes. So here we go. As a volunteer, you'll know that you've got to be courteous and polite and informative and supportive and helpful. All inclusive services, inclusive support is doing the same, thinking about how you might change what you do to make sure that disabled people have an equal opportunity to understand what's going on and enjoy the experience and have a fulfilling visit to whichever place you're working at. We are all different. So some might need lots of support, others might need nothing. And I want you to think about what maybe would you offer to someone who was deaf? How would you support someone who was neurodivergent? Say someone like me turned up, what would you do? How would you say, oh, I'm so sorry, this building isn't accessible? And what would you do to make sure that wasn't so impactful? Would you say, but just down there is another place that's taking part in the Open House Festival that is? Maybe that might be your thing. He says, answering your question for you. This is the best thing to do. So you've got, introduce yourself. Hello, I'm Mick. I'm a volunteer here at wherever you are. I'm part of the Open House Festival. I wonder, do you need any assistance? They might say, oh, hello, Mick. No, I'm fine, thank you. Or, yes, please. My name's Jenny, and I'm hearing impaired, or I'm visually impaired. Could you guide me around the location? Now, you listen to that, and no is fine too. Lots of people can get offended when asking someone disabled if they need help, and they go, no. But no is fine. And then what you do is you do what is requested. Because you might have helped someone like an hour earlier, doesn't mean that this person needs the same type of assistance. It's really important to make it so it's user-led. So you're going to be following the instructions of the person that is asking for help. So, for example, if someone was visually impaired, they might want to be guided around the site and have things explained to them. But then you would ask, how would you do that? And how much information would you like? And then as you're going, sort of make sure that they feel that is this okay? Am I doing all right? That's fantastic. The other thing, of course, is how do you guide someone? Well, the first thing to do is position yourself beside them, slightly in front of them, and you say, how do you want to be guided? Because some people prefer to put their hand, like as in this graphic, in the elbow. Some people like to put their hand on your shoulder, and some people like to put their hand on your wrist. But don't you grab them. They hold you. And what it means is they can let go if they want to. If there's an accident or something happens, they can let go and hold something. And it also means they're in control. So you're leading, but they feel like they're in control. And also talk to them. It's quite funny, the number of people that get guided and don't get talked to. So while you might think, well, I'll better describe everything, just, how did you get here? How are you? Oh, have you come to this before? It's just the kind of conversation you'd have with anyone, but you're also guiding them. And try to remember that you are now guiding someone else. My wife's really bad at this. She keeps walking my friends into lampposts. But she's not in the room, so I can say it. There will be assistance animals. And legally, they have to be allowed in. So visually impaired people will obviously have them, guide dogs. Hearing impaired people might have a hearing dog. Wheelchair users, people with mental health issues, people with mobility issues, and neurodiverse people might have animals with them. Now, so that's something to consider, that there is, while you might say no animals, assistance animals are expected to be allowed in. They're not a specific breed. You can, one of my friends has got hearing dogs, little tiny Bichon Frise, but they can be all types of dogs. They don't have to be wearing any special jacket or anything. They don't have a certificate, which is one of the myths that people believe. There are booklets that can be given out, but they aren't legally required. So it's really important to understand that someone might turn up with what looks like a dog and say, oh no, it's my assistant's dog. It's better to err on the side of saying, okay, fine. They are brilliantly trained. So it's very unlikely that an assistance animal will be sort of difficult to look after, and that is one of the things that is ways of spotting. But it's much better to let someone in who's pretending that their dog is an assistance dog than it is to deny someone the legal right to come into a building because you're not sure. But very important is do not pet them. Do not go alone, because they are working, they're focused. And if you take their focus away, they might do something that isn't good for the person they're supporting. There you go. That's it. So just remember that. Have a go at BSL. But like I said, pen and paper is great. Your mobile phone now has captions on. It's very easy to turn on, and so that might be really handy. It means that you can talk to someone and they can communicate with you. If someone is using BSL, always talk to the person, not the person that's with them, that's interpreting. So it might feel a bit strange, but it's a little bit like when you watch world leaders talking to each other. They always talk to each other, even though neither of them speak the language of the other person. That's what the two people behind them are doing. They're translating. So, just make sure that your eye contact. Somebody might have a speech impairment. Always concentrate on what's being said. Don't panic. So be patient with the person that's speaking and with yourself. It's okay not to understand. They know that they have a speech impairment, and they mostly don't expect everyone to be able to go, I know what he's talking about. Fine, yes. So they're used to that. So don't guess what they're saying or try to finish their sentence. It feels like you're doing them a favor if someone's really struggling to speak, but you're not. So let them finish their sentence and then check what I said. So you want to go here, or do you want to know where the loos are, or something like that? Then, if you haven't understood, there's nothing wrong with saying, I'm sorry, I didn't get that. Because lots of us pretend to understand. Like, oh yeah, cool, yeah, lovely, okay, yeah, great. And one of my good mates, James, who's a conductor with the British Symphony Orchestra, Birmingham Symphony Orchestra, he's got profound cerebral palsy. He has quite a lot of speech impairments, and he says that we all have a face that we pull where he immediately knows that we haven't understood, and then he just knows that he's not going to get what he's asked for, or the conversation is pointless. So there's nothing wrong with going, I'm really sorry, I didn't get that. You couldn't say it again. What James does is he has a PA with him, and he waits 3 goes. He gives 3 goes, and if you missed out, his PA will say what James has said. Some people have someone that says stuff for them. Some people have talking technology, but just give everyone time to get their stuff punched in. Some people might wear a sunflower lanyard. This is a new thing. It comes from America. And basically it's saying, I have a non-visible impairment. Could you help me? So it makes it so you can see that they need support. And so that's what that is. And it makes life very easy. Sometimes they say on them what help they might need in case someone is non-verbal, but it's just a little sign so that you can see it. So if you see someone wearing them, just go over and say, hey, hi, I'm Mig. I'm an open house volunteer here today. Is there anything I can do to make your visit more enjoyable? Do you need any assistance? And that's what that's for. These are wheelchairs. The reason why I show these is because all of them, the 2 manual chairs, the 2 power chairs, and the scooter on the right, would be allowed into most places. All of these would be allowed into museums and public buildings. But some smaller museums, like so I do a lot of work at the Dickens Museum, that might need, that would probably, the bigger scooter wouldn't be allowed in because that is an outdoor scooter. But again, what you'd need to do is find somewhere to store it while the person was walking around. They tend to be used by people who can walk somewhat. But the 2 power chairs and the 2 manual wheelchairs would be used by all types of people with mobility issues. But don't panic, don't panic, don't panic, right? We know the mantra, ask, listen, and act. So that's brilliant. So you know to do that. And let the disabled person lead. Let them take over what they need to assistance. And then that way you're doing what they ask. So it's really great practice. So have fun, enjoy it, and don't panic. And with that, he says, look at that, 1 minute over. We'll stop the training and open up questions if there are any.